approved by the council. Any items removed from the consent agenda will be placed on the regular agenda for discussion and consideration. Are there requests to remove an item from or add an item to the consent agenda? Hearing none, would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Item 6A is accept council committee minutes. Item 6B is approve payments of disbursements for the period of December 1st through 31st, 2018. Item C is the set date of February 5th, 2019 for a public meeting to consider the request for notice of intent to commence annexation proceedings for property in the vicinity of South 96th Avenue and Tieton Drive. Item D is set date for a public hearing on February 19, 2019 to consider a street renaming application submitted by William R. Shields to rename Muth Way to Homesite Way. Item E is a resolution setting the time and place for a public hearing on February 19, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the City of Yakima Council Chambers to hear from the public on the proposed surplus of real property owned by the city and acquired for utility purposes. Item F is a resolution authorizing and approving the fourth quarter 2018 claim report for the City of Yakima. Item G is a resolution authorizing a Parks and Recreation Division Manager to execute personal service agreements during 2019 and, depending upon funding, authorizing the Parks and Recreation Manager to execute any renewable agreements for the following 4 years upon approval as to form by the City Attorney. Item H is a resolution authorizing execution of Addendum 5 to the Engineering and Consulting Services Agreement with Golder Associates, Inc. to complete permitting efforts for the Natchez River Water Treatment Plant Intake Project. Item I is a resolution authorizing an agreement with Councilman Hunsaker to conduct a feasibility study for construction of an outdoor pool at Martin Luther King Jr. Park. Item J is a resolution authorizing a contract with Nelson Construction Corporation for City Project Number 2413, which provides for the installation of sidewalk and other amenities at the vicinity of Garfield Elementary. Item K is a resolution authorizing the city manager to accept and execute the necessary agreements for a $1 million grant from the Transportation Improvement Board for the construction of the North 1st Street Revitalization and Street to SR 12 project. Item L is an ordinance relating to city personnel adopting a classification and compensation plan for city employees to be effective February 17, 2019, and repealing all preceding pay ordinances in the City of Yakima Municipal Code.
Move to approve consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I would like to mention we have two people that wanted to speak to item number I, the feasibility study for MLK. Gentlemen, would you like to speak to that under audience participation? All right, thank you for that. We will move on. I inadvertently skipped the council report. If Councilmember White, if you would like to, as chair of that committee, have your report.
Yeah, at our last Economic Development Committee meeting, we met at the airport where we discussed the downtown master plan, airport operations, and the Central Washington State Fair operations. After the meeting, we toured the facility and, exploring different options and realized it's in poor condition and that there needs to be a lot of work before anything is done there. So at our January 12th retreat, we revisited the downtown master plan. We also discussed the importance of the airport as a major asset to the city. And so for this reason, council agreed to support the airport through its diversification and uses of partnerships and the exploration of regional support for it as one of our 2019 priorities.
Sorry.
That's it.
I don't have anything to add to that. I think you summed that up pretty well.
Anything else? If not, we'll go to public comment.
No.
Okay. This is an opportunity for community members to comment on items not on the agenda for tonight's business meeting. If you would like to speak during public comment, please have a slip on the, fill out a slip on the podium in the back of the council chambers and hand it to the city clerk. Public comment remarks should be limited to 3 minutes per person. The council will listen to comments made during public comment, but likely will not respond directly to concerns or questions during tonight's meeting. We have a number of slips this evening. Pastor Horn, would you like to speak?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think the last time I seen you, I know Kathy Coffee, I think it was with the Southeast Community Center.
I think so.
And when I feel passionate about something, I show up. And so I'm here today in regards to the pool. that I grew up in on the east side of Yakima. We talk about equality. We talk about for the good and for the learning and the education and the entertainment for the children in our city. And I think it should be for the whole city. You know, we're quick to put things. I notice we're putting a aquatics, what is it, over on the west side with the YMCA. And I think the children should still have something on the east side if they so choose. We've been studying a long time, and I noticed you said study. Well, my God, let's see. I'm 39, and we still been studying. And that pool's been closed for a very long time. And when do we stop studying and get to the matters at hand and get real? That the children should have a right on the east side to be able to participate and enjoy their arena of where they live. Why must they come to the west side and have to be forced to go that direction? If they choose to go to the west side, that's okay. But we're still studying, and they should be able to enjoy, wouldn't you say, where they live on the east side. Why can't we make that beautiful sometimes? Why can't we do things for them sometimes? We say that we're equal, but I'm not saying equal. I'm saying that they've kind of been forgotten. And I don't want them to be forgotten another 20 years. So that they can have memories. I have wonderful memories down there at that swimming pool down at Washington, or Martin Luther King now, as you call it. Let's make those memories again. Let's make some things happen for them. Let's make it pleasant where they live, where it's not always about drugs and violence and all those kinds of things. Let's make some joyous things happen for them. Let's not study. We've studied long enough. Let's do something.
Thank you. Jerry Mellon? Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Council. My comments refer to a subject that have been talked about in various forms for many, many work sessions and study groups, and that involves the whole gamut of the homeless situation. The homeless situation is really, there are three components that must be looked at together. The homeless issue, affordable housing, and the H-2A program. All three of those things impact on each other. They're not just one thing. You can't address one and think you've solved anything. The H-2A housing impacts on affordable housing by taking units out of the mix of the supply side. The supply side and the supply and demand side ratio is completely out of kilter. Right? The demand far, far outstrips the supply. All our talk thus far is aimed at how many billions or millions of dollars can we pour into creating more units. We've got over 100, and I would, whatever the city said that number is, of places that are boarded up, empty, vacant, that could be brought into the supply side. That needs to be addressed as an issue. How do we go about doing that? If there are 100 units that are vacant today, boarded up or just vacant, and you could bring those into the market, and two people that are today homeless went together, you effectively could take 200 people out of the category of homelessness and put them into units. All right? This needn't be done with a cost. It can be done with legislation. It can be done with ordinance. It could be done by looking at the city codes. How do we go about doing that? What benefits can we provide to a landlord to bring that unit out? Or maybe the other response is, how can we get that unit into the supply side by taking it one means or another? I guess my bottom line is that I think it's time we look at many other issues other than just spending money, such as changing codes, passing ordinances, or even addressing the addressing the legislature in Olympia or even Washington, D.C. to change some of these regulations so we can begin to address this situation. I have,
Thank you,
through
Jared.
personal situation, I've learned more about homelessness and this whole issue than I ever wanted to know in the last year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicholas Helms. Good evening, Nicholas.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Nicholas Helms. I'm a Yakima city resident, and I wanted to just come forward to talk about the holiday efforts that we had going on, just to give a thanks to the city for their support, and through different fundraising efforts and things like that, we were able to do a few different special efforts. We had a toy distribution in partnership with Marines, Toys for Tots, that was able to give toys to over 800 families, which would amount to about 2,000 kids that received Christmas presents. We had support from the city using the city buses to do our project, what we called Project 400 this year, where we wanted to take 400 children shopping at the West Valley Walmart. And we were able to raise enough money with the support of the citizens of Yakima to take 496 kids shopping from 19 schools in the Yakima, Wapato, and Union Gap School District. And then we, of course, you probably would have seen our red kettles out at the different grocery stores throughout the season, and we were able to raise over $100,000 through that effort. So we're grateful to the Yakima city, the city of Yakima, and all of its residents for helping us to achieve those things and to hopefully provide some hope and support for the people in Yakima who need it. So thank you very much, and we appreciate all your support.
Thank you for your help. Next is James Parks. Would you like to speak on the MLK?
I remember 3 minutes.
Oh, we'll remind you too.
Okay, I'm sure you will. You always do. First of all, I want to thank the city, Mayor Coffey, City Manager Moore, and the council people for going back and look at the money and stuff that you lost and stuff for the alleyways in District 1. You know, I like that. Thank you. On behalf of the NAACP, the Yakima County NAACP, I'm just here to say we can't forget the little people in the Southeast. I worked in the Southeast for the last 30 years. I don't live there, but I work in the Southeast for the last 30 years. You're already doing busing where we're hauling kids out of the Southeast and bust them all over everywhere. Give them the pool. I think you will be judged by that, and I think it'll be favorable to you. Thank you again for the cleanup in District 1. Councilman, Councilwoman, Terrace, you guys, she's thinking about quitting. Don't let her quit. She's thinking about quitting. She's thinking about walking away. I can see it. I can see it. You know, it's so tough on her and stuff. Don't let her leave this council because she's a good person. She's all over this city, you know, and she's doing things that you guys don't even know. So, on behalf of the NAACP, we say keep looking out for the little guys. We're looking out for the Soul Road Park, and we're spending money here. We're spending money there. Keep your heads together, and you'll figure out how to do it. Councilman White, my hat's off to you.
Thank you. Jacinthia Mitchell. I'm sure I did no service. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
I would also like to speak about the pool that's being presented on the east side. First of all, I have to agree with my fellow Yakima citizens. I am so excited and so thankful to the council for even considering bringing a pool to this area and to Yakima. First of all, from the standpoint of children, swimming is one of the most impactful sports on children, on their whole lives, not just on their physical and mental health, but also on their education. Studies have shown that swimming actually helps to improve and increase focus in children because of the rigorous training that it takes to swim. You have to think about every muscle in your body. You have to think about every stroke as you go. And so studies have been done as recently as 2017 that reveal that swim training can increase a person's ability to concentrate and learn at school. In particular, training stimulates the mind for up to 3 hours, which can help to improve exam performance. The findings show that short and long-term effects of regular training increase the number of brain cells and connections between them. This leads to improved attention and accuracy in completing tasks and longer and physical psychological benefits, including management of long-term conditions such as ADHD, obesity, and dementia. Also, they just found out that swim lessons help children's math results. How can you deny that? How can you deny the children of Yakima that opportunity? But what I would also say is that there are some amazing things happening for the swim community here in Yakima. I'm a recent transplant, and where I come from, there was an aquatic center put into the town I'm from about 5 years ago. And what happened with that aquatic center was phenomenal. Since that aquatic center was put into place, it has brought an economic impact of more than $130 million to the area. But it's because it was done correctly. It wasn't haphazardly placed. It wasn't a pool that was haphazardly brought in. It was a pool that was thoughtful with the help of USA Swimming. So the one thing that I would say is when you consider voting on this, when you consider looking at this, even in doing the preliminary study, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. USA Swimming wants to help this community. They've already done studies previously in past years to see the viability of having, in particular, a competitive swimming arena here. It showed that Yakima is by far an exceptional place to have this. There are grants, there's personal funding, there's even the Michael Phelps Foundation, the most decorated Olympic athlete ever is a swimmer. He has grants for areas just like ours. So if we can be thoughtful, if we can be discerning, and if we can be creative, I think not only can we give children in all of Yakima, even the east side, the west side, you name it, the whole county, not only can we give them a wonderful place to establish memories, but we can also create an environment where people from all over, especially Eastern Washington, will want to come and spend valuable revenue dollars while also allowing our children who value swimming to be able to achieve their goals on even a collegiate or Olympic level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our public comment. Takes us to department items. Next on the agenda is item 8, a presentation of community policing efforts by Interim Police Chief Gary Jones. Chief Jones. Good evening.
Good evening.
Ex-police chief.
Good evening, Council. Appreciate the invite to come here and talk a little bit about the police department. I know our time is precious tonight, so I'll try to leave my comments as minimal as possible. But I do want to give a little bit of what's going on with the department and where the direction is, particularly during this interim time. As you know, I don't think I've ever been formally introduced to you or the community as the interim chief, although I've been in that role for some time now. The number there represents how many days I've been a police officer here. And what I'd like to reiterate to you is that I have been here over 11,000 days. I will be here my first day as a police officer. I will be here my last day as a law enforcement officer, no matter what comes out of it. Some of our philosophies and challenges that we're facing right now, as most of you know, or maybe heard some of us speak in 21st century policing, is how to incorporate some of those philosophies. And I've listed the 6 philosophies there, and I'm not going to take the time to go over each one, although they all are important and need to be integrated in our total strategic plan. But we need to find viable ways in working with your committees, our constituents in the committee and community, and how we would actually employ certain of these strategies. As you can see, one of the most important ones that came out of this task force was building trust and legitimacy. And although that is not a new concept for policing, it is certainly a concept that can be lost in operational priorities. We can never lose sight of that. If we don't connect with this community on all levels, we are going to lose the trust of the community. Without the trust of the community, there will not be a viable police department. Thus, other city services could also suffer. Just scanning through this quickly, without hitting all of them again, community policing and crime reduction go kind of hand in hand. And as I've talked about in other groups, community policing can be such a broad spectrum of ideas, but how are we going to narrow that down in our department? Staffing considerations are something we've been talking about for the last couple of years. And we understand that last year we had 148 authorized. We, as of January, only had 133 employed with us at the time. That's commissioned police officers. We had a fair amount of retirements that were some unanticipated, and then we had other departures, which is something to be expected throughout every year, certainly. During that same time, we did appoint 9 new police officers. Unfortunately, we did lose one early in their training. Part of that change of that effort to help build that force so that it's a viable number for us to react to the community's needs was to appoint a full-time recruiting officer. And these are some of the numbers that we've shown, some of the change since we've employed her or assigned her to that. We were only getting about 58% of the people through our old board process onto the background investigation, which is part of the most rigorous part of our hiring. But now with increased numbers coming to the test, increased contact with these applicants before their testing, we're finding that we're raising those numbers, which is a good thing, that they're actually moving on to the oral board. Part of the recruiting officer's effort isn't just to bring people into the pool, but actually help coach them as what they should expect when they go to a police oral board, the background investigation, indiscretions that you do not need to have in your background that could be potentially disqualifying. So that helps with that effort as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Back up one. There we go. Well. There we go. So this year we have 144 authorized, and as of January we had 129 commissioned officers. Just showing we had 8 of those in a training status, getting through the academy, getting through the training car, evaluating their progress. And then we also have 9 on some sort of leave, FMLA, disability, injuries, those kinds of things. So essentially we're about 20% of our force down, our authorized strength down right off the bat. So part of that is cost some adjustments in some of our areas. If you followed at our public safety meetings, we talk about where our resources are being deployed, what actions we're taking, month to month. But that's something that as a command staff and our supervisors constantly have to evaluate and make changes and adjustments, not only on service demands, but to help with this total strategy, as we're going to go over it here in a little bit. So the other part of that is maintaining a good collaborative working relationship with our human resources department. Certainly they are a big tool on our not only recruiting, but help us through the processing as we continue on. The other issue that we have to look at is crime rates, and this is just a kind of a snapshot of per capita crime rates. They do have peaks and valleys. We certainly have increases and decreases over the years. Using a 10-year comparison may not be as impactful, as you can see that things change over time. But overall, this year was unusually, or 2018 was an unusually large amount of homicides, but not something we should ignore. We've had homicides from an array of different types of homicides themselves, where it wasn't just one type of activity or one type of illegal activity that led to these traumatic events. Aggravated assaults, fortunately, we're seeing a decrease, which is fantastic because any kind of assault, serious assault, going down. And even with the high profile and high media exposure to robbery, we're actually seeing a decrease in total number at this point. So we are putting together our annual report right now, and by the next public safety meeting or two, we will have that presented to them as well.
Chief, if we have questions, may we stop you during?
Please do.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. All of us have the presentation in front of us as we're looking up here, but if you do have questions, I'm sure the Chief would be happy to respond.
Absolutely. I don't want to compress this so much that it becomes a blur by any means. I
Thank
want
you.
to have good clarity on it. But in comparing homicides, again, 17 is a large number of a city of about 100,000. The good news is that our clearance rate this year was higher than average and much higher than last year, as comparison to the national average of 61%. And for whatever strange reason, Washington is even below the national average overall in 2017. So as our major crimes unit was very active this year in keeping on with that, it's important that we keep working on not only the cases that are easily solved, but the cases that have more effort into them, our cold cases, our long-term cold cases. So that takes a certain amount of dedication and resource as well. But certainly that's an important factor in our overall crime fighting effort. Other strategies that we need to work on, we know we've already talked about recruiting and hiring efforts. What I've challenged all of the officers with is that recruiting is not one officer's job, it is a department job. And really it's a city-wide effort, because this isn't just exclusive to Yakima. As we know, over the years, law enforcement has had some disdain on national media levels for whatever reason, and we have been very well supported by our community. And I say that in every open meeting that I come to, but it is important that we recognize our citizens support us. And with that, we need to encourage our young people that want to become involved in law enforcement or potentially become involved in law enforcement. We've brought people from all walks of life into it, and we have to encourage that diversity and all genders and all walks of life, because as a police department, we certainly deal with people from all different walks of life and helps with that insight and cultural balance. One of the things I've spoken to you about is our beat officer program, and I mentioned it to the integration community last night. And the whole premise of that is going back to the roots of community-oriented policing or grassroots policing, where a police officer is recognized by the individuals in that neighborhood. And if it's Mr. Parks' neighborhood and he knows the 3 officers that work there that 24-hour shift, he should know them by first name. They should know where the kids are playing basketball, where the games are going to be at, where the party might be that night. The more that you find out about your community, the better you're going to be able to, one, deploy yourself in an appropriate area, and again, two, have that relationship, that building that community trust. Because as we evolved into technology and moving around in iron cages, we have found that more of the community that we poll feel that we are disjointed for whatever reason. And I don't know that was intentional. I think it was just the fact that we are isolated in iron and we have large beats of multiple miles rather than just a few blocks. So what we are going to do with that effort, and along with these others, is come up with a beat program that is interactive online. And I didn't put this picture on there, and it's not self-serving by any means, but that's my mug on there. But the idea is that a citizen can come on, look at the district map that you see in front of you there, and that shows our 9 police beats. And knowing where they live or where their business is or where they recreate, they can click on the badge there, and it'll bring up the officers that are working that area. They can send them an email directly. They can get information about where our community events are going to be in their area. And they can also post things to us that alerts not just the beat officer, but other officers that might integrate and move into those areas as well. So this is part of using technology, but more in the partnership of our stakeholders.
Mayor, I have some questions. May I
Sure.
ask?
Go right ahead.
Captain Jones, when can we, as a council, expect to see these improvements in place and available to the public? Specifically, the beat map. That's my first question.
Yeah, great question. So we're just going through our 2019 shift change, which means every year officers pick which area or which hours they're going to work, and they've just finished up with the interviews of who is going to go to these beats. It's not just because I like to work in this area or I'm from this area. We actually task the supervisors to interview their employees to see why they want to work there, what can they do to improve, and what do they know about it. So February 1st starts our shift change. So hopefully shortly after that, we'll also have the internet piece to it as well.
So you mentioned the internet piece. Considering that many people don't have desktop computers or laptop computers and a lot of them on mobile phones, will there be a mobile interface that's effective for citizens?
Yeah, and I have a great crime analyst who's thought of those exact things, because that's beyond my technology and ability. But she said the same way. If nothing else, we have a phone number that goes to our community service unit that can help deploy people or steer people towards those officers. So they're exactly right. The other thing we're working on, and it's taking a little bit more, of course, cost, is should each of these officers just have a phone? You know, it doesn't have to be a fancy phone, but some way that they can pick up the phone during their duty hours and people can communicate with them. So those are some other.
I was not aware your officers didn't carry phones.
No, not at this point. Yeah, great. Any other questions before I move on? I don't want to fluff over anyone. Okay, thank you. The next thing we're working is what's called Project Safe Neighborhood. And if you haven't heard of it, it actually comes out of the Attorney General's office. Joe Harrington came down a couple of months ago, approached us about this program, and it's DOJ money that's actually siphoned to the U.S. Attorney for that district. In the Eastern District, our U.S. Attorney happens to be out of Spokane. But he is very familiar with Yakima and our local Assistant U.S. Attorney, Tom Hanlon, and he have been talking about sort of our more violent crime, gang-related offenses that certainly could have federal implications or federal charging. So this money can be used in a number of different ways, and been brainstorming, and what we've come up with so far is we really need to use our data better so that it's not enough money to create resources or new officers or task force or any of those things, and we want it to be sustained for some period. So what we're working on now is actually compiling all our data and statistics, not just Yakima's, but all of the Yakima County area or the ancillary area where we know that this violent crime either is stemming from or going to. And it's also interrelated with some of the drug trade. So using those crime-driven statistics, using more of our evidence-based policing, we hope to have more intelligent policing and using our resources more effectively. To answer where that's going, we are meeting actually this week to kind of get the oversight group committee put together, which will be chief officers and senior executives within the federal system. And then we'll have the actually the operating committee on the bottom that will be the grassroots officers, the officers that are going to actually be in the field and deployed, making these information and then combining that with our crime analytical ability. So that is a bright future for us as well. So those are just two of the quick strategies. I'm not going all over them, but I did want to give you some opportunity to talk about or ask questions if there's anything in particular. We are going to continue our efforts with some of the outreach programs that we used last year. Our roll call in the neighborhoods, which has been very popular with picking specific neighborhoods and working with communities, where that swing shift officer or that day shift officer is actually having their roll call in a city park or some other public gathering area in a specific neighborhood, giving people the opportunity to talk to officers one-on-one, and also the kids, they go crazy over it as well, where they get to interact with the officers and so on. So we will continue that. Our Coffee with a Cop has had some very good reviews from other segments of the community. I've already been contacted by a couple of businesses that want to sponsor that for us, so we're encouraged by that as well. But I also want to get back to the individual officers, where myself and a fair amount of my command staff go out and do a lot of this public speaking. I want the individual sergeants and officers to really talk to that smaller group. It may be just a club that gathers about gardening or something about their neighborhood, or more importantly, block watch. How do we encourage people to actually organize, and now they have an officer assigned to that block watch group? Would they be more apt to show up and really participate if they knew a police officer was going to show up periodically? So that's another one of the challenges to our community service group. And I think trying to encourage people, hey, they're complaining about crime, I've got all this going on in my neighborhood, how would you like to help organize that block watch and help us, help you become our eyes and ears in the field? So there we go.
Any questions, comments?
I have a question about bike patrol. It seems I remember last year I heard you would have an expanded presence of officers on bikes, at least in the downtown area. Can you speak to that briefly?
I can. What we have used is some of our federal grant money for that, to hire officers on an overtime basis. Because we were short-staffed, we just didn't have the ability. So, which was a good opportunity for the officers, but we also segmented to a lot of our community events and more of our populous, density populous areas, so, and expanded to our parks. What I want to do, continuing with that, we were just talking about today actually, is keep using that money, but now let's expand it out to some of our areas, such as the Greenway, maybe some of our parks that are farther out during the weekends when they're really popular and going on. Areas, certainly the area of Chesterley Park is going to get more and more people in there as we get the aquatic center and so on. So as we measure how much money has actually come from that, I think we can expand that program a little bit. I've got a large group of officers that were very interested in participating in it. So even on the 100-degree days, they're out there doing their thing. So, and not just the CBD or the Central Business District, but I think we can use that in other ways. But I do want to continue that program. My long-term plan, you know, as we build staffing, I think that's an area where I really like to look as a anti-crime team or a street crimes unit. And incorporated with that street crimes unit is the bicycle unit. And some of you probably remember that I was part of that many, many years ago, although we had to wear long socks and long shorts. It looked ridiculous, but we've evolved from that. But it was very effective even then, when we had a lot of the issues downtown, open drug dealing, prostitution, those kinds of things. Having a uniform presence that was so mobile but silent really has some effect. And the officers that work it now have very, very good results when they do so. And it can also help us in not just enforcement, but as we talk about different ways to combat homelessness and people that are in crisis that are in the street, these officers are approachable. And it's not just an enforcement unit, but it's also understanding the resources that are available to them, such as our mental health professionals that are our designated crisis responders. That gives us that other avenue with that one-on-one contact. So I would like to see that continue.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Cousins had a question first. And
Well, I
then
just
we'll-
have a quick comment. I appreciate you coming to the forum that I did and talk particularly about the block watch, because I know that, and I'm sure you remember, there was a lot of confusion about how that worked, and people want to get it started, but they're not quite sure that whole process. So I think it's great that you're going to start going out to different gardening clubs, homeowners, whatever, and talk about that, because they're very important for people to take pride and ownership in their community, because you can't be everywhere all the time.
I think so, and it's part of that encouragement where you get 3 or 4 neighbors involved. Next thing you know, you've got 12 neighbors involved, particularly when you start getting into areas where there may be a language or cultural barrier. We have to be able to overcome that in some way. So if it's employing the right officers there that can help with that and get the information to them in the language that they're familiar with, I think that's 100% necessary, and that's what we need to work on harder, absolutely.
Councilmember White.
Yeah, you know, I've been talking about the, community policing, community integration, beat cops for a while now, and in these lower income areas and, higher crime rate areas, it's really important. Trust is so important with that community where people can actually feel comfortable speaking to the police, and that doesn't happen overnight. And I'm very glad to see that officers are out in the community and going to certain events and introducing themselves to kids at every chance they have to start to break some of those trends or some of the ways that maybe their older siblings or other family felt about police. So, and the beat cops, that's huge in my neighborhood. I've had community leaders that the officers don't know who they are. They don't know who their officer is, and that's just such a fundamental element to our community. I'm very thankful that it's being implemented now.
Thank you. Yes, and it's a change for some officers, because you got to realize when my generation came on, we all had to walk the beat for a number of a time period, and it wasn't just because they didn't want to give us cars and we were healthier than some of the other officers. It was more that it got us that opportunity to actually engage one-on-one in all these issues. And you had business owners, street people, thieves, all kinds of people that you engaged with, but you had to establish a relationship as part of bringing down that barrier. Equally, I have to train my young officers who've never had that opportunity. They went into a police car right out of the get-go, and that's sort of how they were trained. So now we're coming back around to that. We have to understand there's people in the community that don't like police for whatever inherent reason, but the only way we're going to break that barrier down is through communication. And not everybody's going to come around, but if we don't make that effort, we're never going to break that barrier. So we have to obviously make that effort. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would just say, I'll be curious to follow metrics to see if block watch participation increases as you deploy this beat
Hopefully
cop
everybody's watching that.
scenario. Right, yeah. But, thank
Okay.
you.
I think we all appreciate your coming and the information that you've given us. I think more of this would be really helpful as far as the community getting to know you and the officers. I think it's very helpful.
Great.
And this will help as far as getting the message out. So with that, yes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to also make a comment.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Chief Jones, for being here today, and really for all of your initiative in this effort. We had been talking about community policing in the Public Safety Committee, and we had asked for this presentation to be presented to the full council because it was important that we're all aware about the current efforts happening, as this is a City Council strategic priority that we established a little over a year ago. And I also wanted to, as the chair of the committee, make sure that all the council members understood that if there is a role for members of the council to play in a proactive manner to support these strategies and these efforts by the police department and by yourself, and thanks to the city manager as well, that we are informed of how to be proactive in supporting you. And so I wanted to give you that opportunity to answer that question, if there's anything that we could do to be more supportive.
You know, and I think that's a great question, where the individual officers were probably, and even the department would be very appreciative of, is those small groups of people that we could talk with. I'm not talking about the big media events, the Chamber of Commerce's, all those are important, but the small group meetings, the boys clubs, the Girl Scouts, whatever it may be, and adult type venues where that, if you can relate from your constituents where that is and what it is, so we can make those introductions, I think that would be very, very helpful.
That's wonderful. So if we know any groups, whether they be church groups, gardening groups, knitting groups, but folks that are not necessarily involved in knowing who police officers are, we can definitely make that offer to these groups if they're interested in having a YPD officer join them on some occasion.
Absolutely.
Then we
Even
can
if it's just
schedule that.
frustrated community members with crime, and they want to come together for any kind of session similar to forums, but on a much smaller scale, our officers will be available for that.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. And also, I was interested in knowing if the council thought that we should have a longer discussion on this, maybe a special session. It could be part of a study session with other subjects. I'm interested in knowing if there is additional information, perhaps models used by other communities across the country that support community policing efforts or have orientation around that type of approach. We've done community engagement through community forums as a council, and all of us sitting here have been at one or more of those forums. But I'm curious to know if we have the time to make a study session for this and the inclination to learn more about what other communities are doing, so that we can see if there's a potential to do that here.
I have less of an interest in looking at other community policing. What I'm interested in is that we see a tangible dent in major crime when a new police chief gets seated, and that we get some sort of, relatable results, with the efforts that you're trying with outreach, that you just don't continue, but come up with, ways to increase that. I know your recruiting issue is difficult, but I'm happy that you've got this recruiting officer. I don't know if I can credit all to her that you got 50 more applications processed. So with that many more applications and your BLAE graduates, I want to see results less than I want to study new models, and I want to see consistency and something sustainable.
And I would agree with that. I think the chief is well served to do studies and look at that himself. I think that the Public Safety Committee is also, if that is an interest, that they would be able to do that and bring back anything that is new and interesting to the full council.
So there's only 2 of us here today from the Public Safety Committee, but I will take that as the blessing of the full council to continue this conversation with the interim chief and the city manager. It's on the agenda now for this month's agenda, so we'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank
Chief,
you
we
very much for
appreciate the
having me.
offer.
I also like to thank the officers that support our efforts all the time. And most importantly, I really need to thank the community who has supported the department through our tough times and continues to support us. And I just encourage them to get active with us.
Well, know that you have the support sitting here, too.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all for being here today as well.
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you, officers.
Next on the agenda is the city manager's update. First is a resolution forming the coordinated community response team. Senior Assistant City Manager or City Attorney Cynthia Martinez will introduce this item. I saw her come in. There she is. doing that, I'm going to hand these out. This will be up under other business.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Cynthia Martinez, and I'm here from the legal department. And I want to thank you for considering the resolution that you have in front of me that pertains to the formation of a City of Yakima coordinated community response team to domestic violence. So I've been asked to come here and explain what exactly is a coordinated community response team. So, I'll call it CCRT to keep it, I'm trying to make it shorter for you. I know you all want to get out of here this evening. But CCRT is an evidence-based intervention strategy developed by Domestic Abuse Intervention Project in Duluth, Minnesota. The concept is that those involved in the response to acts of domestic violence coordinate their efforts. So instead of being siloed, the police department's doing their job, prosecutors doing their job, probation's doing their job, we'll all get in the same room and coordinate our efforts. So we will understand each party's involvement in the process, establish common definitions and goals, work to model DV response best practices, and finally, we'll be able to measure results of the response that we have created. So what is our domestic violence problem here in the city of Yakima? Well, we do have a problem. Last year, 2018, domestic violence cases represented 30% of our caseload in the city of Yakima Municipal Court. And those are high numbers. If you look at similar sized jurisdiction, I have a list here. Everett's probably a similar sized jurisdiction, and they're at 21%. And all of the jurisdictions are lower than that are similar size to ours. And the felonies are also tracking the same. They have a high domestic violence caseload. If you look at the YPD annual statistics, you'll see here, and I do have them in the PowerPoint, you'll see that the city of Yakima, devote a lot of resources to gang crimes. And, and we do that for good reason, because of the propensity for violence and innocent victims. But if you look at if you compare gang offense calls, which are the numbers here, with DV offense calls, you'll see that officers are responding to many more DV calls than they are to gang calls. And you have the same sort of you have violence in those calls, and you have innocent victims. And I'm not just the person who is the subject of the abuse, but the children in the household. So the city needs an organized approach to our response. Our current response involves many different agencies, community service providers, and you can see it's quite a jumble. And for a person who is dealing with domestic violence, they've already have a lot to deal with, and then they have to figure out this process. In our system, in the city of Yakima, the advocacy doesn't go to the victim. The victim has to they have to go to the advocacy. And I'd like to get us to the point where actually the advocacy is going to the victim, that they are then, the advocacy will wrap around that victim and help them through the process, versus right now they have to figure out that jumble on their own. So we are considering the new DV advocate position as the person that would organize a City of Yakima community response team. And that's because that's a natural fit. This employee is going to have to become familiar with the different community service providers, the agencies, everybody involved in the response. So it just makes sense that this would be the person that would get everybody in the room and lead this effort. Let's see, a job description has been drafted, just as an update. A job description has been drafted for that position. It is scheduled to go to civil service in February. And so we expect that we'll be able to start the hiring process mid or late February.
Great.
So the CCRT, what they will do these number of tasks here. You know, they're going to establish goals, complete an inventory of the current response, compare the inventory, model response, recognize gaps in our response, implement changes to the response that are immediately feasible. I mean, there's some changes that could probably be done without any additional funds. And yes, there may be some changes where there may be future requests for funds. You know, once a response, once they have a defined response, then, you know, they can move forward educating the community about the response. And then finally, they'll be able to measure that response, see if it's effective, make changes if it needs to be made. A coordinated community response has been shown, it is evidence-based, it has been shown to be effective in improving the response to crimes of domestic violence. So typically, the system works faster, it's easier for the victims to understand. Advocacy, again, goes to the victim. Increased victim protection and contact, coordinated response to repeat offenders, and transparency in the process.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Ms. Martinez. The Public Safety Committee also asked for this to be sent forward to the full council. We've talked about this before, and in large part, we've already supported this even through a vote. This particular resolution in our packet that would be supporting the coordinated community response team wouldn't come at any additional cost. It is simply a mechanism that will be used to help create more efficiency amongst the response system in dealing with domestic violence in the city. And with that, I move to adopt this resolution.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt the resolution and a second by Councilmember Hill. Would either one of you like to speak to your motion?
Overall, we all understand and acknowledge that domestic violence is the greatest problem that we have here in terms of violence. And this is one of the tools that we can use to improve our response system in dealing with this. And I think hopefully this can lead us to multiple other solutions in trying to remedy this problem.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill?
Just to add to what the Councilmember Gutierrez says, we want to do everything we can to alleviate this issue and free up our police officers. And as Ms. Martinez mentioned, you know, the victims have enough to deal with without having to try to navigate a Byzantine system of resources. So I think anything we can do to help domestic violence victims in our community have a straighter path to justice and recovery is something that we should do, particularly at no cost. So thank you for the motion.
Thank you. Council members, anyone else like to speak to this motion?
Yeah, I was, you know, at the public safety meetings we had, we were able to see the breakdown of the diagram and services that we should offer and if we meet those requirements or not. And I was very shocked to see that the city, we weren't meeting those. We were answering no on a lot of those questions. So it's great to have to move forward with this and to start to bring it all together for the people that need it most.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I also agree with the comments that have already been made with 30% of the caseload going to domestic violence. I think it's really imperative that we do whatever we can to decrease those numbers.
Thank you. With any comment?
Sure.
I'm happy to see that this work has continued throughout the Public Safety Committee. This is a long time coming. Ever since I was on that committee, we've worked to make sure that we are also addressing domestic violence as one of the issues that hits our community the hardest. And so I'm glad to see that you guys have continued that work, and I thank the Public Safety Committee for moving this forward.
Thank you. I too am glad that this is moving forward. It is surprising, I think, for some people to recognize the percentage-wise in comparison to gang activity that domestic violence takes up such a large portion of our officers' time, and what a major item it is in our public safety. So with that, I will, if there are no other comments, we'll have roll call, please.
This is a resolution authorizing the formation
Thank
of a City of Yakima Coordinated Community Response Team. Coffee?
Yes.
Cousins?
Yes.
Gutierrez?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. It passes unanimously. Next is on the agenda is a request for a letter of support for Go Rail Communications and Public Affairs. Director Randy Beal will introduce this item.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. At your January 8th regular business meeting, you were presented with and discussed a request for a letter of support from an organization known as Go Rail. One of the representatives of Go Rail was here at the time and made a brief presentation to you. Following that discussion, you decided to postpone action on this, and asked the staff to, number one, take a look at the letter that was provided, the draft letter that was provided to us by Go Rail, and make any suggested changes to it, revisions to it, and also asked us to contact our federal congressional delegation and ask if they had taken positions on this particular issue. In your packet, you have a version of the letter that has been looked at by city staff and revised to a certain degree. One of the things that was done was removing a lot of, removing a fair amount of, I can't think of the right word, but a little bit more aggressive language, taken out some of the will and would, and replaced those with can and could, and also taken out a few of the other potentially a little bit more leaning toward the position of Go Rail. Then it's a little bit more neutral. Yes, sir.
Randy, just the attachments, there's three. One called Letter Clean, and then two called Go Rail. You said the letter is one of these three attachments?
The one that we want you to look at is the one that is entitled Clean.
Okay, thank you.
And that is an abbreviated version of the draft letter that was provided to us by Go Rail. And we have contacted our federal delegation with the help of our lobbyists. We have found that both Senator Cantwell's office and Representative Newhouse's office have not taken positions with regard to this issue. We were not able to receive a response as yet from Senator Murray's office. So with that letter in hand, it is up to you guys to decide how to proceed tonight.
What is the will of the council?
I support the letter.
Would you like to make a motion?
I move that council supports the letter.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to support and send the letter for Go Rail, and we have a motion by Councilmember White and a second by Councilmember Cousins. Would either one of you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think that I don't really think that we should be nationalized or forced access is what they would like to call it. It just seemed, it's a free market type railway, and I don't think that it sounds like, from my understanding, that they're basically trying to get special rates, and I think the federal government has enough on its hands, and they don't need to be taking over the railroads like have been done in the past with negative impacts on our country.
I support the letter because I think anything we can do to support economic development and growth is important. So.
Okay. Council members, any other comment? Hearing that, go ahead.
No, actually.
Roll call, please.
Cousins?
Yes.
Gutierrez?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Coffee?
Yes. Passes unanimously.
With that decision made, this letter will be sent to not only our congressional delegation, but also to other key members of congressional committees.
Thank you. With that, it takes us to agenda item number 10, other business. Are there any other? Oh,
Number 11.
Item 11.
Oh, thank you.
You, it's on our agenda. Yours is wrong, but yes,
Oh.
you were right.
Other business. Are there any items council members would like to discuss under other business?
I have a few comments.
Yes, please.
I would like to discuss the pools and the study, the feasibility study. I've tried really hard, and I thought we actually discussed that not to use the wording feasibility study and to use preliminary engineering and something else. And because it's not necessarily a study like it would. I mean, it's not necessarily a study to see if we need a pool there. We already know where we're putting the pool, and it's more preliminary engineering. So we're actually going to come up with some concepts and to move it forward so we can move forward with the project and seek funding on that effort. We also have the competitive swimming side of it, Lions Pool, that we're looking at. And we're not looking to reinvent any wheels, but we are definitely reaching out to those organizations, and or we will be reaching out to those organizations. We haven't done so yet with USAA, but that was kind of my vision also with Lions Pool, is it would be that competitive swimming, kind of fill that niche that we have in the valley. And also with our MLK pool and Lions, or at Franklin Pool, there's several models around the country, or there's one in particular that we're looking at that that seems to offer a lot of solutions to the credentials, the financial side of it that we have, and being more of those outdoor pools being more of mini aquatic centers and not just a rectangular hole in the ground. So they're more modern, and we're just making sure that we spend the time and reach out to the people that already know, and we're not starting from the ground up. We're just working off of what others have to offer.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do have an agenda item. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. We do have 4 individuals that would like to speak to that item. Would you like me to introduce the topic and then hear from the individuals?
Yeah.
As you may recall, during the 2019 budget session, it was the will of the council that they wanted to withdraw the $75,000 in lodging tax funds from the Sun Dome. I, as chair of the LTAC, or the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, took that message to the November 28th, 2018 lodging tax meeting. There were several options and discussion that took place under that, and it was ultimately decided by the committee that they would recommend that they honor the original 2019 lodging tax fund for the Sun Dome of $75,000. So that is the message that I'm bringing as chair back to the city council.
Do you want to
Yes.
say what the vote was?
It was unanimous.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that it was unanimous,
me.
even though there were other people on that committee that could have received that money, that they all voted for the Sun Dome. Yeah. I just-
The other people that are on the committee received their funding.
Yeah.
That was voted on. So they received the funding that they requested. Excuse me. So,
Can you explain that again?
So I think if I understand it correctly, the other people that receive funding from the LTAC are the
Convention Center and
Convention
Capitol
Center,
Theater.
the Capitol Theater, and the Sun Dome, correct?
correct.
And the people who vote for it are, or the people who are on that committee are the Sun Dome, the Capitol Theater, the Convention Center, and the hotel managers.
That's
That's
correct.
correct. So people who are
Who collect the
who
tax
collect the tax
and then who
vote
receive
for
the tax.
themselves to receive the tax.
That's correct.
Okay.
You've got it.
All right.
Actually, Steve, if you want to come forward, if you have anything, you were there and acted as secretary during that. I would say that,
That's a nice arrangement.
well, it is,
Folks involved.
it's law. There has to be a matching amount of people that collect it as there are matching that receive it. That's the state law.
If I have a question, how many of, I know that we only have one council representative, and how often do you, how do these individuals get appointed? How does this process happen? Because it seems to be a bit unbalanced when it comes to having city official representation versus the individuals that receive the funding.
So as you may recall, I want to say that it was session number 4. We brought some of these data points to you, some of these facts, because there was some confusion as to what was the role of the LTAC in comparison to the council. So under the law, it's 2 to 1. So it's 2 from the hotel industry, 2 from the recipients, and 1 from council. I don't remember exactly what the date was, but at one point a former council, and the council decides who is going to be in the LTAC. So it is your body, you appoint it, no different than you appoint to any other commission. At one point in time, there was a change, and so it went to 4-4-1. So instead of 2 to 1, 4 from the hotel industry, 4 from the recipients, 1 in council. So we had conversations with a few of you as to how that increase in the hotel representatives and an increase in the recipients was not matched by a increase in elected officials. However, please remember that the role of the LTAC is advisory. They're an advisory body to you. You make the decisions. So 4-4-1, 2-1, 3-3-1. At the end of the day, it's a recommendation, and you decide how you want to proceed.
Yeah, and it is all stated in state law. It's not just by deciding which one.
So how did we, was it by state law that we decided to increase 2 additional recipients and 2 additional hotel members?
Actually-
No, actually, that was a decision
was
made in
you.
the city council.
It
It's
was
allowed, it's allowed.
It was a
by
council
state law.
decision, but it had to be balanced. Had to be, if you
you-
added 2 on one side, they had that 2 on the other.
Yeah, you
But
can.
not on city officials?
No,
That's a non-voting position on the board.
and that also is in the RCW.
I'm just asking
No,
questions.
no, that's fine. But you can increase it even more, but you have to have a balance. You have to have someone that accepts the tax and somebody that would take the tax. I mean, it has to be balanced always.
And again, please remember, it is an advisory committee. So that was, I think, the major point of clarification, even among staff, as far as what is the role of the LTAC in comparison to the city council. And ultimately, the city council is the decision maker for the body.
So if I may, I'd like to read the recommendation from the committee. Ultimately decided to recommend the City Council honor the original 2019 LTAC recommendation of $75,000 in lodging tax for the Sundome. In addition, the committee suggests that the council engage in an annual reevaluation of the level of lodging tax support of the Sundome operations. Finally, the LTAC also suggests the council engage in discussions with the county on future funding options for the Sundome.
Madam Mayor,
Yes?
I would like to make a motion around this issue, but I would like to hear from the people that are here to speak to
All
it
right.
first.
I know we were presented at the last economic
Is
development.
that the will of the council to hear from the,
Yes,
Folks
I'd
that
like
are
to
here,
hear from
I
the
think.
people that have been waiting to
Oh, you
speak
wanted
to
to hear
this
from the other
topic.
people first? I thought you wanted to hear from us first.
No.
Okay,
There's
okay,
four of us.
okay, sorry.
All right.
Sorry, I thought you were telling me.
Lisa Vallejo, if you'd like to come up. Lisa?
She barely said it. That's
Well, first of all, thank you, Mayor Coffey, council members, and city staff. We do appreciate you hearing how we do feel about the distribution of the lodging tax funds. As a hotelier and been in the lodging industry for over 20 years, close to 30, kind of aging myself here, I do see the impact that partnerships within our valley do impact tourism funds that do come into our valley. Loss of the $75,000 to the Sundome would impact some of the partnerships that we've already created with WIAA, which is a huge impact to not only lodging facilities, but to our community. As a parent of a child that travels and as seeing these sporting events come in, there's a lot of revenue generated throughout local businesses, restaurants, just within our community, not just within the hotels themselves. We feel that this money is more of an investment, not a gift. We're investing along with the Sundome, building that partnership at very low bid prices. We get together and we provide spaghetti feeds to these kids coming in. It's something they don't see at other cities. We're trying to not lose conventions and not lose events to our feeder cities that we know are competing with business here. So it's really crucial for us to maintain these partnerships that we've established with WIAA. And in doing so, we've partnered with the Sundome in providing us being able to bring food in and feed them for cheerleader functions, for volleyball, basketball. And as lodging partners, we get together and we provide this to them, and this would not be available per se if we had to pay for the facility when we went to present this to these kids. So we feel it's really very, very important that this relationship is more of a partnership, and I feel it would negatively impact if that funding was taken away. I feel it was a very quick turnaround. We've kind of planned for 2019 already, and I think this was just something laid on the table very recently. So we, as hoteliers, didn't even have a chance to kind of look at the impact it would take on our properties as well. So I just appreciate the time that you have given to us tonight to be able to address this, and I encourage you to support the Sundome, as it is a great partner in our valley for tourism.
Lisa, would you like to explain what WIAA is?
Oh, that's the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. So that's all of your basketball tournaments, the volleyball tournaments, major revenue impact in our valley. And as hoteliers, and I'm sure a lot of the local businesses will attest that it does have a huge impact.
Thank you.
In the financial. Okay.
Sarah DeVella?
Hello. Thank you, Mayor Kathy Coffey and council members. I just wanted to show my support for my fellow hoteliers in this decision. It's very impactful for the year 2019 that we already are in. So in addition to what Lisa had spoken to, the LTAC committee did vote on this, and that kind of spoke volumes to me. And thank you again for your decision making. I know you have to make, but we thank you for your support in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Allen? Hi, Sarah.
Mayor Coffey, council members, city members. So I'm here obviously for the same thing, just to support the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's decision-making process. I'm on the LTAC committee, and so I was there, and it was a unanimous vote, as was mentioned. And so we just want to show our support for the Sundome, State Fair Park, and all that they do for us. The funds, these particular funds, are used to keep various large WIA events, as Lisa mentioned, in Yakima throughout the year, but in particular on our shoulder seasons, where it's like the end of the season before we get into the slow winter months, and right in the beginning of the year when the hoteliers do need something in Yakima to bring us business, and in turn, sales tax dollars. We as LTAC committee are charged with being good stewards of LTAC's purpose and the funds, and we must reinvest back into room nights and economic development. We have over 90 years of lodging experience among us, so I'm getting all of us, and we wholeheartedly believe that this is definitely the best use of the funds at this time, just so that we don't lose out to the other cities. It's very, very competitive, as we all know, and we are feeling the impact. I'm on a bunch of other committees too, as a whole, 2018, and even into 2019, and we just really want to be ahead of the game, and we want to keep our partnership. Since the Sundome started receiving $75,000 from LTAC, there's been a 50% increase in basketball events, 2/3 increase in volleyball, and the addition of rodeo, just to name a few. This is about $10 million in revenue at Sundome events alone in 2018, and so we want to see that continue, and this money would definitely go towards that and probably increase a little bit more. If we lose any of these WIA events, it will lead to a lot more losses, including maybe our labor force if we have to lay people off or shorten hours, sales tax dollars as a whole, and the trickle-down effect of possibly losing other sporting events. So we just want to show our support for that, and thank you guys for hearing us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colette Keaton?
Good evening. I believe we have a unified message going on here. Mayor Coffey, council people, members, city staff, thank you for letting us speak to you this evening. As a member of the LTAC committee also, I strongly desire that you vote with the recommendation that the city council honor the original 2019 recommendation of $75,000 in the lodging tax funds for the Sundome as stated by our chair, Kathy Coffey, in her letter. I would speak to the immediate impact to businesses required to collect the tax, us, the lodging facilities. For 2019, that would be affected if what would be affected if the monies distributed to this tourism activity represented by the Sundome were not available. Excuse me. The WIAA events, which Lisa spoke to, they start and they end the occupancy season for the hoteliers in the city. They begin at the end of February. They start at the end of February, and they end in mid-November with state volleyball. These two events alone probably make up the biggest parts of our first and our fourth quarter revenues for our budgets. As noted in the lodging tax revenue collections that are reported by the city, you'll see that 2-month lag and how they really are attributed to this. We would really be at a loss to fill these room nights generated by these activities in any other way. There is no other demand for rooms at this point in the season. The loss to our properties, along with reduced revenue and the sales tax to the city, and of course the drop in the lodging tax collections. This relationship began in 2015 between the city, the Sundome, and the Lodging Association, with awarding this tax money to enhance the bids for the Yakima events that was given to the Sundome. I believe since then we have grown and strengthened this relationship between these three entities, along with the WIAA, and of course the economic impact in our city. So I encourage you to support the continuation of this relationship. It is to the benefit of all of us in Yakima, and I give great credit to our city leaders that we are able to continue to build on these strengths. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. All right, are there any further comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I appreciate the comments of the people from LTAC and the hoteliers that came tonight. It's difficult to put it in reference in an analytical sense because, I think it was mentioned that someone said they wholeheartedly believe the best use of the $75,000 is, to have it restored to Sundome support and operations, and that $10 million in revenue, that number was thrown around. But I don't have a clear sense of how much sales tax revenue we're predicted to lose, or even that if that can even be accurately predicted if we don't provide the $75,000. So I feel the best use of the money. Well, the number one strategic priority of the City Council, as we espoused on Saturday, is restoring the reserves. My inclination is to say no to everyone and everything and make it painful until those reserves are fixed. Take a scalpel. On the other hand, I'm not trying to take away $75,000 and lose, I don't know, and I'm just pulling numbers out of there because no one has provided that yet, maybe $150,000 in sales tax revenue, maybe a lot more, I don't know. So I need a little bit more information. I'm not hearing any number of what we stand to lose. I hear we'll lose money, but no one has told me how much in sales tax revenue to the city. Can anyone speak to that?
Well, I can a little bit, and I can just say that being on the sports commission, those numbers were given to us at one of the meetings. Rough numbers were given to us at one of the meetings, and it drastically changes drastically changes in the impact on economic development. So that's why I would like to make a motion to put this on our next agenda, since it is in under other business. But I wanted to give everybody a chance to speak before I do so.
Was that a motion or was it just a comment?
It's a comment that I want to make a motion to put on the next meeting, but I want to give everybody a chance to speak to the issue first. But if you want me to, I'll just make a motion. I move to put the $75,000 in lodging tax funds for the Sundome on our next council agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to put this on the next council meeting with a second. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think that the numbers that were provided at the sports commission meeting should be provided to council as Brad Hill mentioned, I don't think that they've been in front of everybody, so.
Yeah.
And
Councilmember.
I'm in support of the $75,000 going back to the Sunday.
Councilmember Hill.
I would just say that presentation needs to be very good and very number specific, and it needs to go back a few years. And I want to see the revenues that we've got in sales tax, and I want someone to stand up and stand by a number of what we stand to lose. If that isn't the case, and I don't feel it's accurate, I'll be pretty vigilant in making sure we take that money back again for reserve purposes in 2000 and the subsequent years.
All right,
If I
Councilmember.
just might clarify,
Council.
that LTAC money isn't general fund revenue. It can't be used to
It's
restore reserves.
It's a dedicated.
It's a dedicated fund, right?
So
So what's the source of the 75 grand again? It's not out of general
it's
fund?
room tax.
Room tax
Oh, okay.
for
only be used for
Convention center,
convention
capital,
centers.
tourist
related.
Tourism related.
So anything that is tourism related.
Oh, okay.
So it has no bearing on our reserve
Then
fund.
I don't have nearly as much of a concern about it.
I bet you don't.
Thank you.
All right, we have a comment here.
Um,
We have a motion on the table, but
Actually, before I make the comment I want to make now, just a point of information. What do we consider as tourist facilities in the city of Yakima?
I believe it's defined in state law, but it's those that bring individuals to the community and have overnight stays
Overnight.
and spend money.
Okay, so would the airport fall in this category?
The airport, by and large, serves local residents that are coming and going for work and pleasure.
So it has to be lodging. It can't be like the Sozo complex or
Yeah.
an example like
Yes,
that.
yes, it can.
So it could be, yes.
Okay, so that's why I'm asking for specifics. Can you give me a
if you
list
have,
included in-
it's typically defined as a overnight stay from 50 miles or more.
If your choice is to put this on your next council meeting, we'll have
We'll
that
have it.
information.
Well,
and
but
be
we're
able to-
having a
yeah.
discussion, so she's asking a relevant question.
I
Okay.
just don't want to misspeak and say something that is inaccurate.
Okay,
Well, that's the state's description of the use.
My comment was in relation to the material being provided with this agenda item for the next business meeting. It would be good to know what lodging tax money could be allocated towards, not just what is currently being, where it's currently being allocated to, but what is the list of
The
possibilities?
full scope.
Yeah, the full scope. But also, I would like for there to be information on, or some sort of correspondence with the county to see if they are able to have a match with the city of Yakima in this investment. And I am using the word investment intentionally. I do believe it is an investment, but I think that the county has a large role in being our partner in this investment. And so I'm curious to know if there could be some correspondence before our next discussion on this at the next business meeting.
Thank you.
I think Councilmember Gutierrez made a great point. As all of you are aware, we're still paying debt service to a bond we took to do some investment for the Sundom. And so she's absolutely right when she says that there needs to be at least some sort of investment from the Sundom to whether it's matching on the debt service, because we're already heavily investing in the Sundom, a facility that is not a city property. It's not an asset of the city. So I'm accountable to my constituents, and I have a fiduciary duty to make sure that we are using our tax dollars in our assets. And I don't know that this is something that goes within those lines, but I would also like to see that the LTAC would possibly have an opportunity to meet maybe more often on a quarterly basis than maybe just once a year, because this recommendation came at the very end of our budgeting process. And so, yeah, it was a surprise to them as it was a surprise to us when all of this happened. And so I also do serve I'm the liaison for council on the hotel motel, and on that would be the best information for council to see month for month. They have a revenue from each
month as to the sales and rooms that have been occupied, and so we'll be able to see the amount of sales revenue or tax that is collected. And so I'm excited that we're having this conversation.
Anything else from anyone? Yes, Councilmember White.
At our last economic development, Greg, I forget his last name, that runs the operations, he presented to us and he showed us the numbers of heads and beds of people coming in from outside of that range and a comparison to other entities that are receiving money. And from that analysis, it was an overwhelmingly positive response to us for that $75,000. It far outweighed those heads and beds versus those other entities that are receiving significantly more money. So from that perspective, it looks like a great investment, and then to be able to keep those kids coming here and see all that Yakima has to offer. So I do support them getting the money, getting the $75,000. I think it's money well spent for those other projects that are on the board currently, but I also do support us looking at other possibilities with other venues like the airport, and also support discussions with the county on future funding for the Sundome.
Okay, I think we've all spoke. I'd like to say that I think that the lodging tax needs to be used for facilities that the city owns. We have a tremendous debt service on our city-owned facilities. The county owns the Sundome and has responsibility. We, however, also have a responsibility to continue to try to bring tourists here that fill our hotels, because that's where our retail sales come, and it also brings in the lodging tax that generates new room nights. So I think we're kind of caught in a catch-22 here. I think the most important thing is to bring back the actual facts, those being where are the dollars being spent, how much does it generate, how much are we spending on our own facilities, which we need to keep up, and how much is the county contributing toward the industry. And I think that would be enlightening.
And I would just, Mayor, if I may, yes, I'm particularly keen to learn about the county's contribution, and clearly I'm not familiar with the way LTAC works, so I want to have a clear understanding. If we don't restore the money, exactly where else could we spend it, and what would be the perceived benefit? It doesn't sound like it could either go to the city facilities, and we have limited options.
Yeah, you have limited options on what it can be used for, but it's much broader than just the city facilities.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think all those things need to be put out in a talking points so that everyone knows exactly the same.
I'm a little skeptical that if we don't have a spaghetti feed, we're going to lose some major customer.
Well, I think there are other options for spaghetti feeds rather than just the Sundome.
That was decided when that's on
There are other facilities.
That reminds me of dinner.
Yes, and dinner. So if
Oh my gosh, this is an early
we do
one.
have a motion on the table. If you'd like to repeat the motion, and then you can take a roll call.
The motion is to put the $75,000 in LTAC funds on our next council agenda. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Hill?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
White?
Yeah.
Coffee?
Yes,
Cousins?
Yes.
thank you. Passes unanimously. Are there any other business? No? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adjourn to our next city council business meeting, a study session on the 22nd of this month here in the chambers at 6.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.